Bueno, en Lima no se aplica un impuesto para desarrollo de proyectos ambientales. En el Perú, en general, las normas no nos permiten hacer eso. Solamente tenemos la recaudación de impuestos por un tax que se le dice arbitrio municipal, que se paga para el tema de recojo de residuos sólidos, ¿no? Y etcétera. Lo que estamos trabajando como una iniciativa para evaluación es el endoce de este impuesto ambiental a los residuos de servicios que se entregan, por ejemplo, en el cobro de la electricidad o en el cobro del servicio de abastecimiento de agua. Ese es un tema que está en evaluación. Y sobre la parte urbana que me has hecho recordar ahora, es muy importante comentar que cuando las ciudades desarrollamos nuestros planes de acción climática, tenemos que pensar que esto tiene que engarzar completamente con nuestros planes de desarrollo urbano, ¿no? Y con el paquete de normas que tenga que venir con ellos. Si estos dos instrumentos no conversan, no vamos a haber logrado mucho, que digamos, ¿no? Entonces eso también es importante decir.
Yeah, of course.
There we go. Actually, there are a number of financial models that one can use. Taxes is just one of them. So ICLA has just released for the COP a finance toolkit, including a decision-making tree. So please take a look at that on our website. And you click yes, no, based on where you are as a city. It's aimed at a municipality. And then it takes you to finance options. And it includes your own financial mechanisms as a local government, but there are many others that are actually also options, including public-private partnership approaches, but with the green spaces, quite often that is in the municipal government's budget to plan green spaces and to make sure that this is not just a cultural space, but it also cools down the city center. Typically you have overheating, so you have water features, green space, which makes it nice for people to live in. So that's part of standard urban planning activities normally.
Una cosa más complementaria. Es que sí, hay fondos internacionales que nos permiten poder aplicar para desarrollar proyectos, ¿no? Tenemos el BID, el Banco Mundial, en nuestro caso CAF, la Cooperación Andina de Fomento, ¿no? Hay organizaciones internacionales como GGGI, que es una organización con base en Corea, por ejemplo, el mismo ICLA y C40, ¿no? Que nos ayudan con estudios técnicos, pero muchas de estas organizaciones nos ayudan con desarrollo de estudios básicos, estudios técnicos, que son súper importantes porque un problema de las municipalidades es la falta de información de la ciudad que tenemos para poder desarrollar buenas iniciativas, pero para poder ejecutar proyectos en sí mismos, la dificultad que tenemos es que estas organizaciones que pueden invertir grandes cantidades necesitan que estos fondos sean grandes. Por ejemplo, la Cooperación Andina de Fomento nos dice, sí, pero yo necesito que tu proyecto sea de 10 millones para arriba. O sea, 10 millones de dólares, ¿no? 10 millones de dólares para abajo, o sea, no aplica, ¿no? Y como municipalidad local, que nuestro alcance es un poco más pequeño, nuestros proyectos van por los 2 millones, 3, no llegamos a los 10. Entonces, también una de las sugerencias que estamos lanzando a estas organizaciones es que podamos empaquetar, ¿no? Que pues, si no se puede, o sea, empaquetémonos con otras municipalidades para poder hacer cosas más interesantes y más grandes, ¿no?
If I can change a little bit the subject, but still stay with the municipal authorities. I mean, in the European Union, there is legislation that will require, after 2021, that all the new buildings are near zero energy consumption. I mean, the latest statistics that I have access to in Spain means that, I think it's 2016, the statistic, but they say that 46% of the new houses that are being built in Spain are not thermally efficient. So, I mean, I don't know what authorities do expect that is going to happen between 2016 and 2021. I don't know if there's going to be some kind of miracle that all the architects are going to become experts in designing. I can tell you, the technology to make a near zero energy building does exist. It is not revolutionary, it is about insulation, ventilation. I mean, it can be built, okay? So, but either the architects are looking, or the promoters or whatever are looking to the other sides, and you know, there is a little bit of an extra cost, maybe 3-4%, and as the consumers, we are not willing to pay this extra cost. but something really is not working. And sometimes we say something is going to happen. The question is more, what do we do? I mean, I've been in conference, Heidelberg, a city in Germany. The mayor has said very clearly, no housing development in my village that has not a sustainability plan, which means zero energy, waste recuperation, waste recycling, etc. So I don't know why some people do and some others don't.
You guys?
Yeah, a question for everyone, really. Claudio talked about the 8 requirements, starting with advanced building energy codes. To what extent is this something that national governments need to do? I mean, how much freedom of action do cities really have if they want to revolutionize their buildings policy?
Yeah, I think that some of that key action should be taken at the national level for sure, but other action can be also taken at the local level. So if we are speaking about, for example, district heating and cooling is something that you can put in practice in a municipality level, or if you are designing a new district in a city, it's quite easy to implement. Also, I have to mention the situation in the region we live, Lombardy. They decided to anticipate the requirement imposed by the European Union to have nearly zero energy building, not to 2020, but to 2016. So all the new buildings built in Lombardy region from 1st January of 2016 are expected to be nearly zero energy. So also locally, it's possible to implement some key action. It's not necessary to work at the national level. So honestly, I think we have a lot of possibilities. We don't have excuses. We cannot wait for a big decision from European Union, from the central government, or so on. Also, a measure of a small municipality, as you mentioned before, can do something practical every day.
Another point is taxes. I mean, you have the new houses, but you also have the housing stock. I mean, by any standard, there are 30 years to go to 2050. So if you want to make thermally efficient all the housing stock, you know, more or less 3 per year, 3% times 30 years, that's close to 100%. The rate of renewal of houses in Europe varies per country from 0.4 to 1.5. So there are countries that on average, we need to wait 100 years to get the existing stock thermally efficient. So it is very obvious that the governments will have to push any kind of tax scheme to incentivize the renewal of the renovation of houses to get this building stock to be thermally efficient. And I mean, today they do exist. I have spoken to several European Union. I mean, yes, the money does exist. You need to be an athlete or a doctorate in architecture to be able to fill all the papers and get a little bit of the money. So, I mean, what is it? I mean, it is, we lie to ourselves on that point.
Iba a decir, the built environment is very fragmented, the whole value chain. So right now, I guess the thing is radical collaboration to get this done. It's not easy. National governments do have a say. We heard already there has to be a dialogue between the energy ministers and the housing ministers to have a vision and a direction right. It depends also on the governments, if they're central, federal, etc. The EU, we have a lot of hope in the new Green Deal. And this is rolling along in terms of very ambitious policy going forward, even about the policy is called levels, about whole life cycle, environmental product declaration. It's really ambitious. It's going to be at the forefront of what countries are going to be looking at in the years to come. And of course, it may be slow, but it doesn't matter. That's why NGOs are here, for us to collaborate radically in whatever we can share to get the job done. Municipalities are key because they get that inspiration and get things done, as the city of Lima, as the city of Socorro, and the private sector is the one that's going to invest. So my final thought is, don't forget the power of what's happening with responsible investment in the financial sector. There are great pilots about energy efficiency mortgages out there that are empowering citizens to understand what they're buying. I think people do care a lot what they buy and how much they pay. I think they will care even more if they understand it's about the quality of life that children and their families have in their homes. Recognizing that we still have to build and renovate at a very high rate, we can decarbonize. We can do this, and it doesn't mean that it's of course it's going to be delivering value. It's about the just transition. It's about all companies getting their fair share of how they're going to move forward. But there is a power of national governments getting a signal that this is coming and that is a vision. Local governments acting through all these networks and this collaboration to get things done. And all the other non-state actors plus business, understanding that there is something that we have to significantly shift in order to really get this sector that is very complicated, understandably, right, because we are the first generation that is going to be more urban than rural. So, and that's going to continue. And if we don't leapfrog the applications in the informal Africa, in Latin America, in East Asia, the world can't handle a high carbon urban environment. Yes, please.
Wow, that was amazing. Thank you. Just to add on, I think we have an enforcement problem. National governments can make all the legislation and regulations they wish, but if they don't finance enforcement, which normally is dealt with by the local governments, this will not happen. So it's sort of a combination of what you've been saying. I also think the insurance and reinsurance industry is part of this conversation because they are seeing the devastation after floods and hurricanes and you name it, and they need to invest and getting things rebuilt. So this is another complex factor, but it's also an important factor to bring to the table the whole insurance industry to make sure that the conversation is broader and more inclusive as well.
Claro, desde los gobiernos locales, claro que podemos hacer muchas cosas, ¿no? Por ejemplo, hace poco acabamos de ganar un fondo para un proyecto de calidad del aire por C40. Son algo de 40.000 euros que nos están dando para poder implementar un tema de sensores de calidad del aire, ¿no? Pero ha sido un proceso, como comentaba, de llenar los formularios, de ver que toda la información esté correcta y tal. Y estos formularios, como gobierno local, ya los llenamos ¿cuántas veces al año? No lo sé. O sea, lo intentamos y lo intentamos y lo intentamos hasta que se abre una puerta, ¿no? Y esa es la idea también. Los gobiernos locales, algo que no nos sobra es el financiamiento. Entonces tenemos que intentar siempre, ¿no? Y en el tema constructivo, Lima está trabajando con Perú GBC, ¿no? Con Francesca, ¿no? Estamos en algunos trabajos con la Gerencia de Desarrollo Urbano, también con el IFC, para poder desarrollarlo, porque como gobierno local una de las cosas que podemos hacer es tener una ordenanza que promueva la construcción sostenible en la ciudad, porque somos los que establecemos los parámetros urbanísticos con los cuales se construye y tal, pero creo que no hay que perder de vista que el proceso constructivo debe ser sostenible, la edificación misma debe ser sostenible, pero también hay que pensar en que eso es bueno, es importante y va a contribuir, pero ¿qué pasa si las personas que luego, sobre todo en edificios multifamiliares, qué pasa si las personas que luego van a vivir ahí no utilizan bien ese edificio sostenible, ¿no? Entonces, si tiene una planta de tratamiento de agua para el reuso de sus propios residuos, etcétera, y no la saben usar y al año va a estar fuera de servicio, ¿no? Entonces, eso también es un trabajo de la municipalidad, por ejemplo, ¿no? El tema de la educación ambiental para que eso sea realmente efectivo.
It's a pity that my Spanish is not so good as my English, so you can understand how big is my problem. So the guy in the third row, no, you're not yeah.
So just want to ask, Cristina, you were mentioning something very important about financing and unlocking financing for these investments. And even here within Europe, where we are far more advanced than in many other regions, it is still very difficult to get this financing because there is a very high, we have to de-risk this financing, and there's like a sea of tools to navigate this atmosphere, and it's very complicated here. And I'm talking about Europe, where it's supposed to be leading these things. So maybe my question is more about to Marike. I don't know if that's within your competence for ICLEI, but is there some sort of plan to make this easy, this navigation, so that not only municipalities, but also private investors and homeowners can go through this sea of tools and requisites more easily to find this financing and to de-risk it and make it possible?
Perdón, hasta que estuvo abajo prendió. Perdón. The first part is there's a big job in getting an understanding among industry about standards that you can classify assets according to their climate risk, if you like, or their energy performance. There's some great work being done with green bonds. It's Sean Kidney from Australia. He's with ESG criteria. There are many now people with all their portfolios of real estate disclosing performance, environmental, social governance, and accordingly, big real estate, let's say, decision maker, institutional investors are able to discriminate better what kind of real estate portfolios they like. Very high performance buildings and green, let's say with green premiums and brown premiums. And so there's some discrimination there. As we saw from the labeling from housing, many, and even from Argentina, there's now the labeling kind of like what we see in the fridges from A to G of energy efficiency, and that's becoming more common in cities. So ideally, citizens will be able to understand the degree of energy efficiency, and rating tools have a job to do worldwide. I just very quickly said there's 10 new rating tools, zero carbon tools. Those are benchmarks that go to a local baseline. And that's the key problem. Baselines around countries are difficult, so it's data, transparency, and how that disclosure is made for investors to understand how they're comparing this asset here in this country with this one. How do I compare? What's the value? What's the premium, right? And that's the pricing of the financing we need to unlock at a greater scale. It's not easy at all, but it comes from both ways. Disclosure from the owners of the real estate through ESG, right? And the other way around, regulators asking for better benchmarking versus baselines, municipalities understanding what are their consumptions and asking what is the performance they seek, and rolling this out in a consistent way where all the industry can understand where their money should be better invested going forward, that it's climate proof and that we're building for purpose.
I think to add on to that, if you zoom out a little bit, guarantees are being established by the European Commission through the Global Urbis program, which identifies urban actions and urban projects as well. There we need national governments to step in more, to give national guarantees for national projects or city-level projects, to give confidence to the investors that their investment actually is worthwhile. So I think that investor stability, investor confidence is a major issue that national governments need to take responsibility for. At a smaller level, it's interesting to see some of the cities that have successfully piloted small subsidies for things like solar thermal systems or for improved renovation for homes and using better materials and so on. So I think it's a mix of things again. And every actor that should be participating in this space needs to better understand its role and its possibilities. I think there needs to be more awareness raising around what can be done immediately, what can be done at the short term, and what should be done right now. I think the urgency isn't necessarily well understood either.
Thank you. So, last question, and I ask for a quick answer from each of my panelists. And it is, how is it possible, in your opinion, to change the mind of architects, of course, but also of investors, of builders, of owners, of inhabitants, to reach an actually sustainable architecture? Starting from Pamela.
Ok, como comentaba hace rato, los que estamos aquí ya no nos tienen que convencer, ¿no? La idea es difundir esto hacia los demás. Por ejemplo, nosotros tenemos un problema importante con algunas industrias cementeras que tenemos en la ciudad, porque están justo donde están ubicados nuestros ecosistemas frágiles. Pero, ¿qué pasa? Los ecosistemas frágiles se designan después de que se entregan las concesiones mineras, ¿no? Pero en base al diálogo y en base a las conversaciones que se pueden gestionar con la empresa, se han podido ver algunas mejoras y soluciones, ¿no? O sea, yo creo que sí se puede hacer industria, sí se puede hacer minería, se puede hacer algo bueno, se puede hacer de buena manera, ¿no? Entonces, y yo creo que esto está cambiando, o sea, poco a poco los mismos inversores están viendo la forma de cómo encontrar la oportunidad en estos temas, ¿no? Así que creo que poco a poco vamos a ir cambiándolo también, sí.
Thank you. Oh, that's a tricky one. It brings building, it's the nexus points, building, water, energy, waste, all coming together in this space where we live, where we work, where we have fun. For me, it links to multi-level governance. It's not a logical leap for many people, but for me, in my work, it is. All levels of government have to better work together and understand the challenges and co-design a work plan with immediate effect. This is for me the logical place. The second maybe is each of us. You live in a place, you work in a place. Is your building sustainable? Are you asking the right questions? If not, it's now the time to start asking.
Thank you. Christina.
Yes, I guess the first conference where I was faced with this topic was full of passive designers and architects, right? And I came with this language and they were really mad. They were really mad because they thought they were doing a great job and that, what are you talking? We're not doing great buildings. And the thing is that the world has changed, and I think the answers that we face, the problems we face are very complex. So my answer would be open to diversity, understand place, understand climate, design for climate, not only for doing a building, design for people, for climate, for diversity, but also for the unforeseeable future. Buildings will have to be resilient. You have to design for unforeseeable consequences of cooling and heating. You have to make sure that's gonna be net zero carbon in the future.
Thank you. I mean, let me put a comparison. I mean, you remember or how your father used to buy, or your mother used to buy a car? Used to go to the car dealer and what's available? I mean, because otherwise you have to wait too long. Huh? I mean, right now, you go into internet and you design which model you want, which color you want, and then you click and they tell you, you know, maybe in 1 week or 2 weeks or something like that. I mean, a car is today a system by which Renault or Peugeot or whatever sits with Michelin, with Saint-Gobain, with other companies and design a car that they have been able to bring it down to 3-4 liters per 100 kilometers. I mean, when my father bought a car was 15, 16. So this is something possible. Today, when you buy your house, someone had a piece of land, call an architect, please build me a set of boxes, for as many boxes as you can. then the constructor will come and say, oh, you know, each one of those is very expensive. I can do it for half the price, so I will put very thin windows, insulation, boo, who cares, you know? And at the very end, the consumer comes and says, I mean, this is the house. I mean, I think the answer to that is that we will need to have a whole system that will work, and in that system, sustainability of the house will be a factor. And I think for that, digitalization is going to help us a lot. For example, today, all the architects are supposed to work with BIM, building information modeling, which means that the actual owner can see the house, how it's going to be built, can have an impact of how it is going to do. So I really believe that marketing, digitalization is going to bring a big plus to the way we live.
Yep.
So I think that beside what David told, we have to do sensibilization in every possible manner. So I do my best with my students of architecture. So before they start to design a real building, I try to do, also if I teach building physics, but the first...
To stop them.
Yeah, the first two lectures are about climate change, are about how we can change the future energy demand of the building by our own activity. Also, when I install the PV system on my house, I try to show it to my friends to explain the benefit they can get. So we have to sensibilize and to be informed. So we have a lot of possibility today. We can download the beautiful manual we wrote. We can download a lot of publications of reports containing information how to design a building, how to use a building in a brainy way, in an efficient way, how to drive in an efficient way a car. So we must be sensibilized, and we have the possibility to get the proper knowledge to do this job.
Thank you, Claudio. So I can say that the best panel of the day is over. Just kidding. And we can close the conference, I think. Thank you for being here with us and to be patient with me. And my compliments once again to the organization.
Well, so we made it. We're done for today. We have tomorrow two additional roundtables on the implementation of the technical or technological solutions we saw today, and also on how the systems interact between them so that we can see the sector coupling. Tomorrow, Fernando will not be with us, so he will be the closing remarks for today. He has prepared a beautiful insights on what we got as lessons learned from today, and he's going to leave the land prepared for the discussion tomorrow. So I leave the floor to Fernando.
Thank you. Okay, so I was preparing some notes here, but the first word I think is gratitude. Gratitude from all of us to all of us. I think it's been a very enriching day. I guess most of us came now with a new perspective on a challenging and complex issue. We were, Ruth and myself, taking notes. In the same time, we were trying to facilitate the progression of one session after the other. It was not easy. And in parallel, 2 or 3 people are taking detailed notes, and we have a several pages document almost there, but it's very, very kind of draft and preliminary to be read as the conclusions. We try, but it's really too detailed. The document will eventually be converted into a more formal conclusion session. So my last words on this kind of conclusion take us more kind of food for thought, more than a exhaustive, detailed collection of what has been said today, because there are many, many ideas. My only flow will be basically from the beginning to the very last moment of today. We began with the communication by Mr. Jovet. He presented Chile as a humble country in terms of contributions to emissions, and he was representing also the tensions in that country that made all the implications to move the COP to Madrid. He mentioned many different aspects and presented things that went later on taken by other speakers as well. The fact that no country can do this alone. He was presenting the political wills. No? After that, we got the lecture of Professor Sachs, and obviously he communicated many things. He knows about this issue. He's been working on this issue from many aspects for decades. And one of the things he was trying to be very synthetic in what is the greatest challenge in the decarbonization. And it was only one word, basically was knowledge. Knowledge on what to do, pointing to the facts like corruption, greed, power, the lobbies, the inertia as problems. But the solutions will come with the identification of a plan. And from his talk, you can actually envision 3 E's. The E of economics, the E of ethics, the E of engineering. Too much diplomacy, in his words, too many lawyers, too many negotiators, and too little practicalities. So he was presenting the conference of today as an opportunity to put engineers and scientists and technical people up front. No country can do this alone, again, was mentioned, and collectively, we have to set and build a roadmap. Every region needs to collaborate with the region that is nearby, but also in a global world where the things are move around at large scales, the contribution even of the humblest country can be crucial. No? We need answers, no more theory. And he finished with this alarming message of emergency. Then Rector Cisneros made a strong point on how local things can be important, and he was presenting the commitment of the university, and the CV, the curriculum that has to be already incorporating the notion of climate change and how to go to reduce the emissions from the very education of the people, and how this university in particular was not only supporting this conference, but is engaged in a long-run commitment in this way. After this, we enter in the session of roadmap. The session of roadmap in itself presented many aspects. It's very difficult to summarize, but for instance, Kobe mentioned an interesting play on words, from partnerships to partnering. This idea is basically that partners have to be more active. We tend to distribute roles. Okay, you do this, I do that. More kind of passive. No, you have to actually partnering, to engage into roles that perhaps nobody is covering and to incorporate to the roles that you were assigned beforehand. Maria, for instance, identified the fact that is a little, puzzling, because in academia, in engineers, in these areas, we have the knowledge. But actual data, in most cases, come from the industry. So we have to make a better communication and flow between the data and the knowledge, and not only playing the theory on one side and the practicalities in the other side. Also, it was very interesting to see the vision of circular economy in a very broad perspective, not only focusing on the carbon cycle. It's a cycle about people. It's a cycle about many other things, about materials, about resources in a general perspective. No? The fair transition involves people, and it's not only because of a question of ethics, but also it's a question of functioning. So the roadmap was very inspiring. Continuing with the sessions of today, we then enter with Manfred, who said, after 27 years, politics have not delivered. Now we have to work in the how. And then the sessions on the how started. You may remember this afternoon, evening, we had 2, and before lunch we had another 2 on the how to do things. The technology, many aspects, many details were presented. Some of them were known by some of you, but the overall perspective, just ingredient pieces of information. No? We all suffer about the limitations on the batteries, for instance, so we need better and cheaper batteries, urgently. The importance of accompanying mandates with accompanying measures with understanding the market, the transition of the economy of the new technologies. Joan Herrera said something like, well, he presented several questions that were shocking. He was trying to provoke, no? For instance, he said, should we take away gas from our lives, especially in temperate zones? City-territory pact requires a new dialectic between countryside and the city. Look at the way we arrange the sessions today. Actually, the cities are something. Well, the cities are surrounded by a countryside, and the two kind of systems requires probably closer connections. The French conflict was a good example presented, saying that, look how complex the things can be, and with the best of the intentions to reduce the carbon emissions, then you get a social conflict that is now expanding and hard to really find direct solutions to it. Well, we also saw interesting little examples like the city of Rosario in Argentina. Daniela was bringing interesting local visions on how they were making the energy more efficient, how proud they felt about having a certification of the houses that were efficient in terms of energy. Despite all of this, she was recognizing that only 9% reduction of emission was at the reach. So the capacity was all the way up to only 9%, but it's worth the effort, or at least in her words, and I think probably in the mind of all of us. We traveled to Indonesia, and we saw some of the challenges of a place with 100 islands, the distribution of energy. That is something to think, and not to immediately do as you do in other places. I mean, in Spain, we don't have 100 islands. The things goes in a completely different way. Don't export what works here. Try to think here and locally, no? And this connects with another interesting concept that is more about thinking than doing, is the identification of bottlenecks, bottleneck logistics, where there is a point in which all the systems really becomes very intensive in carbon. We heard the intentions of the aviation sector. It's interesting how much they can move into the technological way, into the technology areas, but there are many other aspects associated to this way of transport that probably requires a very honest discussion in the society as a whole. We also address in the session of transport the issues of long-haul navigation, how hard it is to abate this, and what are the current technologies. Apparently, again, one more speaker was saying that some technologies are there, perhaps not at the right scale yet, but the technology is opening opportunities. Some word of cautions were presented by FIBE, saying that not much on synthetic biofuels because of the environmental risk. Sometimes the technologies must be revised not only in terms of carbon, but also in terms of other environmental potential impacts. José Manuel Vasallo presented an interesting paradox, or a trade-off, or whatever you want to call it. Two things that tend to go opposite ways along the human history. The reduction of mobility versus no compromise of the quality of life. So reaching this equilibrium of reducing the mobility, but keeping the quality of life in good terms is really an ambitious goal that might be, and is probably likely to be, important in the agendas. What else? Well, many things. It's really hard to synthesize the session on industrial processes, those steel, concrete, fertilizer things. No? There were many points. We know about how intensive they are in terms of carbon, and there are warning words interesting also to consider. If we move away from fossil fuels, then we are consuming land and water. So probably, again, we need to reach an equilibrium, and we need to see more than one perspective, not only carbon, right? We saw many examples. I'm not going to enter into details. Probably you may know even much more than I about hydrogen, ammonia, or the hydrocarbon decarbonization possibilities we've been exposed to. For instance, the fossil-free steel and the possibilities of implement this in actually a large scale in a couple of years by the example that Martin brought today. There are many things that can be said, and regarding the last session on cities, I better don't ruin the image that you have. It's so recent that you probably have taken your own mental notes, much interesting and more lively than the ones that I can bring today. I think it is very interesting and stimulating to see key progresses on zero carbon cities all over the world. So for tomorrow, there are 2 sessions waiting for you. The day of tomorrow will be from 9 to 12, and the 2 sessions, instead of being very topical, will be more cross-cutting issues. We'll be promoting the necessary discussion among different sectors that typically present conferences, talks, and workshops independently. Finally, as a little play, I was making a list of words, keywords. I think most of us came to this conference, especially under the tense international situation in many countries, actually in one of them that pushed the COP to Madrid. So we have all these in mind, in addition to the problems of the climate emergency. We came with words like complexity, commitment, emergency, crisis, problems. And I think after the sessions of today, we may now have another list. The list can be alliances, countries, people, actors, technology, ready, opportunities, hopes, decarbonization, land, water, ecology, and finally solutions, actions planned, and above all, together. Thank you.